Dave Talks Comics, Episode 61, Micronauts Special Edition, Issues 2 and 3. Dave Talks Comics is a podcast on the subjects of comic books and cartoons. I talk about comics I have read and cartoons I have watched. I talk for my notes. I don't go panel by panel or scene by scene. I try to do more than just summarize the stories. This program is not spoiler-free. I try not to spoil everything, but in the process of talking about these comics and cartoons, I will probably spoil them in some way. Micronauts Special Edition Issues 2 and 3. I'm picking up where I left off last time. These are Issue 2 reprints, about 2.5 issues of the original series of Micronauts, and the same for Issue 3. Basically, I believe issues 2 and 3 take us up through, well, I think up to like the middle of issue 8 of the original series. And these were written by Bill Mantlo and drawn by Michael Golden. And the artwork varies a little bit. In some places it's better than others, and I'll talk a little bit about that. And there's quite a few extras in these Micronauts Special Edition, and I'll also be talking about those. But first I'm going to go over some of the things that happen in this issue, and I guess I'm going to go a little more. In my intro I usually say I don't go blow by blow, and I'm not going to go blow by blow here, or page by page, but I am going to give some summary of what happens. And I'll try to provide some commentary as well. So the first thing that happens in issue 2 is the battle continues because the Micronauts have arrived on Earth from the Microverse. They are much smaller than human size. They are only, I'd say, a few inches tall. But they're being pursued by one of the Micronauts, Acroyear, his brother, works for Baron Karza, the bad guy in this series, and he's pursuing them in his own spaceship. The Micronauts are in the Endeavor, which originally was Commander Rand's. Commander Rand and Biotron were the crew on the Endeavor. So the Micronauts are fleeing Shaitan, and so they have a battle they arrive in Daytona Beach, and they have a battle in the backyard of Steve Coffin, who's a teenager who's out mowing the grass when all this happens. And they ended up doing quite a bit of damage to the backyard. And also to a nearby speedway skateboard circus. So the Micronauts then follow Steve and his father Ray straight to H.E.L.L. And that's H.E.L.L. as in Human Engineering Life Laboratories. And they're following them partly because Ray has his hands on. Ray is a scientist. He's a former astronaut, and he got his hands on one of the spaceships, Prince Shaitan's spaceships, because these spaceships kind of break down into other spaceships. You got to remember that these things were toys, and that's part of the reason why the comic books came into being, because they were marketing really for the toys, like a lot of comic books have been over the years. So the Micronauts arrive in H.E.L.L., Human Engineering Life Laboratories, and there they encounter one of Ray's co-workers, Professor Philip Prometheus. Now, Professor Prometheus, they give Professor Prometheus his backstory. He was also an astronaut. He was on Space Lab, was it Space Lab, Star Lab, which you can read about, which was a real thing, although it wasn't anything like it is in the comic book. And he was damaged, and the ship rebuilt him, but it had to use mechanical parts to fix him, and so he's now a cyborg. And he has an interest in learning more about the Micronauts. He has his hands on some other people who have traveled through from the Microverse to Earth. And he starts hassling, pushing Steve for information, because Steve kind of indicates that he knows a little bit about the Micronauts. And when that happens, Steve's father gets very angry and attacks Dr. Prometheus, and they both fall into the Prometheus pit, which is kind of a portal between Earth and the Microverse. So the other thing that you get, that's most of the story that happens in this issue, but the other thing you get in this issue is the introduction of one new character and more information on another. The new character is Slug, and she is the leader of the resistance, the rebellion against Baron Karza, because Baron Karza has basically enslaved most of the people of Homeworld, of the Microverse. And so she is introduced, and then you also get to see Prince Argon, who has been transformed into a centaur, unwillingly transformed into a centaur by Baron Karza's scientists. So that's about it for this issue. There are some extras in this issue. There is all of these issues have an editorial or an essay on the inside front cover. There are no ads in these issues. In the special edition version of the Micronauts, there's no ads. And there's an article. I don't know if this is reprinted from an issue. I don't think it is. This isn't reprinted. I'm pretty sure this isn't reprinted from an issue of Micronauts. So you really have to buy the special edition, because these have not been reprinted in any way other than this. Or maybe somebody scanned it and put it online. But what you get here is an essay by Bill Mantlo, the creator of the Micronauts, or at least the creator of the Micronauts in their comic book form, explaining the creation of the Micronauts Confession. And he talks about how he confesses that his mother is actually responsible for the Micronauts. But then he goes on and explains how he learned about these toys, and he got ideas about doing a comic book about these toys, and he took that to Jim Shooter, and how they then approached Mego, which was the company that made the Micronauts, and then how they sent them some toys, and then how they got these ideas, and then how Michael Golden got involved in this, and the editor Bob Hall, how he got involved in it, and it's or is it Al Milgrom? Well, Bob Hall was involved in it. Then editor Bob Hall. Yeah, Bob Hall was definitely involved in it. So anyway, you get a one-page story about that, and that's pretty good. It kind of helps to expand your knowledge of the series, and I kind of like that kind of background on this kind of stuff. And then in the middle of this issue, you get a 2-page spread which has a map of Homeworld, the molecular center of the subatomic microverse. And it's got all these little insets, or all these little insets, is that the right word? These little images showing what all these different places in the microverse are like. What they look like, from water worlds to icy worlds to mountainous worlds to volcanic worlds. And it's not so much history. Well, there's a little bit of history here, but and I may have even mentioned this in the previous recording where I talked about the Microverse, or about the Micronauts. about the first issue of Micronauts Special Edition. The only other thing you get here, you get the original covers to issues 4 and 5 of Micronauts, and you also get a one-page ad for X-Men and the Micronauts, which was written by Chris Claremont and Bill Mantlo, with art by Butch Guice and Bob Wyacek, and I believe Butch Guice is the one who did all the covers for these special edition issues, these beautiful wraparound covers for the special edition issues of Micronauts. And I think that's about it for the first issue or the second issue of Special Edition of Micronauts. Now, the first issue left off with Ray Coffin and Professor Prometheus falling through the Prometheus pit into the Microverse. Oh, and one other thing I wanted to say about, you know what, I'm going to hold off on that. I will talk about this later. I wanted to say something about Professor Prometheus. I did a little bit of research, but I'll get into that. So they fall through. Now, Professor Prometheus, they kind of get separated. Professor Prometheus survives the journey from the. I guess I don't know if the Microverse is technically within the 616 universe or it's its own. I think it's its own universe, but I'm not 100% certain on that. But he encounters Baron Karza. Oh, and the other thing is that he does not shrink when he travels through this. So he arrives in the Microverse looking like a giant to the inhabitants of the Microverse. And Baron Karza, he encounters Baron Karza, and Baron Karza just realizes that he can use Professor Prometheus as part of his master plan or something. And so he merges his consciousness with Professor Prometheus and then returns to Earth to wreak havoc, and I'll get back to that. Now, at the same time, Ray Coffin, who also fell through the Prometheus pit, also survives his journey, but he, instead of meeting up with Baron Karza, he meets up with the Time Traveler. And the Time Traveler transforms Ray into Captain Universe. And there'll be more about that in a couple minutes. So that's what happens to Ray, and that's what happens to Professor Prometheus. Now, the Micronauts and Steve escape from H.E.L.L., the Human Engineering Life Laboratories, but they have the cops pursuing them at the time. And eventually they manage to evade the cops by in the Everglades. But they're not. But then in the Everglades they encounter the Man-Thing. And if you know anything about the Man-Thing, you know that whatever fear burns at the Man-Thing's touch. So they're not exactly in a safe place when they encounter the Man-Thing. But they manage to chase him off, I guess. Using one of these swamp boats with the big fans on the back, and there's a lot of splatter, Man-Thing splatter, but I guess they chase him off. Now, you also in this issue get a lot of background on the Shadow Priests, on Commander Rand, because of course he's 1,000 years old. He started this journey, went into deep sleep, and went on this journey when 1,000 years before, and so you get background on him, on his parents, and it's finally revealed who his parents are, because there had been people using this exclamation, Dalinan sepsis, and it's finally revealed that these are Commander Rand's parents, and they were murdered by Baron Karza after he had taken off on this trip. And you also get more about the Time Traveler, when the Time Traveler encounters Ray Coffin, Steve's dad, and transforms him into Captain Universe. You get more information about him. And then and the Enigma Force, which I'm not going to go into that here, but and also the Shadow Priests, who it's kind of revealed are not in league with Baron Karza. They're kind of holding things in place in hopes that somebody will step forward and rebel against Baron Karza. The other thing that you get on Homeworld is that Slug and Prince Argon, who were in issue 2, escaped from Baron Karza's prisons and joined forces with the rebellion. And also Prince Argon, who's now a centaur, takes the name Force Commander. And I assume this is one of these things, that it's because they were going to... It was probably what the toy was called, and Bill Mantlo probably came up with the name Prince Argon, and the toy was probably called Force Commander, and so he kind of had to come up with a story to push the two together, or to, how does Force Commander work into this story? And so this is how Force Commander works into the story. It's actually an alias for Prince Argon. So that's... Oh, and then the issue ends with the Micronauts leaving the Everglades, returning to H.E.L.L, the Human Engineering Life Laboratories, and where Baron Karza has just emerged and is attacking the armed forces, or maybe they're security forces. I'm not sure if they are the National Guard. It's not clear exactly who they are, but they're... and this is actually some of the best artwork, I think, so far. The drawing, and I'm not sure if it's just the combination. It's probably has something to do with the combination of the penciler and the inker getting more comfortable with one another. This is... Bob McLeod is the embellisher. Let's see, was he the embellisher on the previous issue? He was, I'm not sure. Where is the credits on the previous issue? I'm not seeing them. Okay, I'm not sure. That may be the first. I'll have to look that up and find that out. But the artwork in this is much cleaner. I don't know. It's just something about it, and much more reminiscent of what I remember some of Michael Golden's later work looking like. So the issue ends with Baron Karza emerging from the Prometheus pit and wreaking havoc. And then on the very last page, you have Captain Universe, who Ray Coffin emerges behind him, ready to attack. Call me an avenging angel, Baron. Come to safeguard Earth. Call me Captain Universe. So, and I think this is the first appearance of Captain Universe. I'm not certain on that. What I do know is I did a little bit of research on Ray Coffin and Steve Coffin. Now, basically the two of them kind of disappear after this story, and by this story I mean the first 12 issues of Micronauts. There's a couple appearances. There's one appearance by Ray Coffin after this in Marvel Spotlight number 9, which was actually drawn by Steve Ditko. And came out about a year after issue 12 of Micronauts. And Steve also appeared in that issue, and then he appeared in a comic called Cosmic Powers Unlimited number 5. Now this is all coming from the comic book database. I'm not sure exactly what role he played in that issue. It only ran for 5 issues, I know that, and this was 1995. And I think this was a series that the Silver Surfer was the main character, but there was a lot of other characters, cosmic characters in there. From looking at the cover online of Cosmic Powers Unlimited number 5, I could see that Quasar was on it, and Beta Ray Bill, and I didn't recognize any of the others, but so they only had like 1 or 2 appearances each. Now Professor Prometheus does appear in a few more issues of Micronauts, issues 15, and then issue 42, 43, 44, and annual number 2. So that runs up through about 1982. And then there's nothing until 2009, so roughly 27 years later, he appears in War Machine number 7, and then a couple years after that, in 2011, he appeared in The Heroic Age Villains number 1. And I haven't read any of these comics, so I really don't know anything about them. I was a little disappointed, and this is what I was starting to say earlier about Professor Prometheus, because they gave his backstory the bit about him being on Space Lab, Star Lab, Space Lab. Let me find this in this issue if I can. And about how he was injured, and my crew were outside Star Lab. They died, killed by cosmic rays. Inside the ship I lay near death, but Star Lab's medical systems, the systems I designed, restored me to life, replacing damaged organs with jury-rigged bionics. I was a machine. I was refitted, rebuilt, until I became more than a mere man. So, and there's more, but I'll stop there. But I was really hoping when I did this research that I would find out that there was another comic book that this took place in. And I think this is something which is kind of common for me. I remember reading some of these stories when I first started collecting comics like X-Men and Captain America and stories like comics like that, like back around 1980, 81, 82. They would give, like a 2-page backstory, and I really hoped that there was, and sometimes they would indicate this was a flashback to a prior issue, or the original story had been told in a prior issue. And quite often, what I would find is that there really wasn't much more in the prior issue. They basically told you everything, and the artwork was maybe redrawn, but it was basically lifted directly from that issue. So there really wasn't that much to gain from going back and reading those. And in this case, there really was no other appearance of Professor Prometheus. This was the first appearance of Professor Prometheus. Extras. Okay, so there was some extras in issue 2. First off, there was another... wrong issue. Issue 3 of Micronauts Special Edition. There was another article by Bill Mantlo, this one called Bringing a Microverse into Being. And apparently this goes back to a Fantastic Four story. It looks like from Fantastic Four number 75, which I have not read, which was called Worlds Within Worlds, in which the Fantastic Four traveled on the trail of the Silver Surfer and arrive within Worlds Within Worlds. And then he goes into some background on the Micronauts, some of which I talked about, I think, in the previous installment, about how Baron Karza was put in charge of a research station called the Body Banks, and the power that he gained there went to his head, and basically he had the power for eternal life to restore people. And he it corrupted him, and he ended up doing what he could, and he ended up taking over Homeworld. And I mentioned before that he killed Commander Rand's parents, who were the rulers of Homeworld at the time. And there's a little bit here about a language. Doctor Strange somehow figures into this, although it's unclear to me if there's actually a story where Doctor Strange appeared. Maybe I'll do a little more research and see if I can find anything out about that. I like to think that this isn't just something that Bill Mantlo just wrote, kind of just made up here, but there was actually a comic book story before it, even if it didn't directly reference the Microverse, but that somehow it was related to, because he's got like I said, maybe I didn't say, he's got an alphabet here for the Microverse. It's not just an alphabet, but it's also a system of symbols for their numbers, and I really haven't gone through this, but there are some places, I guess, where they show this writing in the Microverse, and I guess it can be translated. So I think. Wait. There's a couple more things. Then there's also a 1-page pinup of the spaceship, the Endeavour. And this is, it kind of looks like the sort of thing that would later appear in the official handbook of the Marvel Universe. And, of course, I don't think the Micronauts ever appeared in the official handbook of the Marvel Universe, and that's probably because they were a licensed product, or they were a licensed creation. And so Marvel only had their rights to the Micronauts for a period of time, and I'm pretty sure that by the time they would have appeared in the official handbook of the Marvel Universe, it was the license had run out. They had not renewed it for whatever reason. For whatever reason. And there are a few characters, like Bug is one who still appears in Marvel Comics because he was a creation of the Bill Mantlow's of Marvel Comics. He was not part of the... Hold on, I'm looking at something. He was not a creation of... He was not a toy that was part of the toy line that was created by Mego. Now, I just checked on one... There was one other character I wanted to look up, and that was Slug. And she does appear in quite a few issues of Micronauts. Not every single issue, but... there are after issue 12, 13, 14, 22 through, almost every issue from 22 up to 35. Yeah, really quite a few of the issues in the first 50. I'm not sure exactly how many. It's probably at least 20 issues out of the first 50. It might even be 25 or 30 issues of the first 50. So I think that's about it. That's about where I'm going to stop for this recording on Micronauts Special Edition. There are 2 more issues to go. There are extras in those issues. There was also an ad in the back of this, just like there was an ad for a limited series in the back of the previous 2 issues. This time it was an ad for Beauty and the Beast, which was a 4-issue limited series starring Dazzler and the Beast, and it looks like Dr. Doom is the bad guy in this. I have not read this. I'm not sure how good it is. It looks like it's written by Ann Nocenti, Don Perlin, and somebody whose last name is DeMulder is the inker, I'm guessing. So that's it for Micronauts Special Edition issues 2 and 3. I will, at this point, I think I'm going to do one more recording on this series, and in which I will talk about issues 4 and 5. Couple more things. I want to follow up on a couple things that I said earlier. First off, I made a comment about the inkers and about how the inking on what would be issue 8, which was split, which the beginning of which was in Micronauts Special Edition issue 3. I was really impressed by the inking there, and it was done by Bob McLeod. I might have mispronounced it and said McLeod just because of the way it's spelled. That's kind of how it looked, but I'm pretty sure it's pronounced McLeod. And the thing is that I looked back, and it's interesting because he is new on that issue. And prior to that, Joe Rubinstein had been the inker from issues 1 through 7. And then starting with issues 9, the inker is Al Milgrom, at least for the next 9 through 12. I'm not sure beyond that because the special edition issues only cover up through issue 12. The other thing I wanted to comment on was Doctor Strange. I made a brief mention of him because he was mentioned in one of the extras, the essay at the beginning of Micronauts Special Edition issue 3, Bringing a Microverse into Being, which was written by Bill Mantlo. And they had something in there about the language of the Microverse. And what I found is that basically what he says in the essay is basically what's out there, and it actually isn't something that predates these issues of Micronauts, which is what I thought it was, or I thought it might be. It's actually something that shows up in Micronauts issue 35, which is titled Origin of the Microverse, and in which it's revealed that the Micronauts, the people of the Microverse originally came from Earth, from India, and that's why the language kind of looks like Sanskrit. And get this issue and read it if you want more information about that. Either, well, you get a brief version of it, although possibly it sums up everything you need to know in Micronauts Special Edition issue 3, or also Micronauts issue 35 is what it is summing up. That's it for episode 61 of Dave Talks Comics. Dave Talks Comics can be found on the web at davetalkscomics.com and facebook.com/DaveTalksComics. And on Twitter at Dave Talks Comics. Email can be sent to davetalkscomics@gmail.com. If you're looking for more information on comics, then I recommend trying comicbookdb.com or comics.org. For a more complete list of websites that I use when preparing to record an episode of Dave Talks Comics, go to davetalkscomics.com and click on the links link near the top of the page. Next time on Dave Talks Comics, I will be talking about Hard Time issues 7 through 12. I'm Dave. Thank you for listening.